Welcome back to Sam's Garage, where we have the long-awaited Hudson Hornet project. Sam, with the help of Doug Harris, prepares the engine to be reunited with the chassis.
So this is the cool part. It's a little bit scary too because this thing weighs so much and we got it on 2 3/8 bolts. And Doug had a good idea. We're using a big thick chain and this particular chain doesn't have anywhere for it to stay stationary on the hook of the engine mount. Doug, tell us why you put 2 bolts on.
Yeah, you want to have the bolts. When you get ready to slide a motor in, you want to make sure it doesn't slide on the chains for a safety factor. So if you go ahead and you slide the bolts in, it's not going to be able to go past the hook. So it's a real good preventive thing that you want to make sure that you do when you're getting ready to put an engine in and support it by chains.
And you know, we got the whole nose of this off. Mike from Lewis Rod and Customs was nice enough to keep the nose off for us. I went ahead and removed the radiator core support, giving us lots of room to be able to put this thing in there because this is all painted and nice. The last thing I want to do is hit anything and scrape something, create a scratch. Now, this is very heavy. We could hook up the transmission to the engine, but it's going to make it really heavy and I don't want the engine hoist to tip over, and we kind of need the length for us to be able to maneuver this in here. So we got a strap across the frame and we're going to strap that in to hold the back of the engine so when it drops down, that way we can go up in the air and put our transmission into the back of the engine.
So it's not uncommon in doing a build like this that you get to a certain spot, you have to think on your feet, do some stuff different, and it allows you to keep the build going forward. Otherwise, if you wait it for the right part or something happens, if you can't do it, it'll really slow down the build process.
All right, Doug, here's your nut. Now, I don't want no laughing. Yes, we're using lug nuts. This is temporary. We couldn't find a 7/16 20 pitch nut anywhere around, so we're going to use these lug nuts until we get our build done.
I don't know. I think they look pretty good, Sam.
We don't want people making fun of us out there, you know what I mean?
I don't know, man. I like them.
So we're going to go ahead and put our nuts in place, and at this point, we can go ahead and tighten our bolts that are holding the motor mount to the chassis. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and strap it to the back. We're very close to the firewall. We're about 1 inch away from the firewall, so please, you got to be careful when doing something like this. So we're going to make sure our strap is good and stationary so the motor doesn't fall.
Right. Yeah, you know, and the question was asked to me, why do we have the strap in the back? You're only holding the engine up front, and so you're going to have to hold the back of the engine. If you didn't have a strap in place, then what happens is the nuts in the front is not enough to keep this engine from tilting all the way over. So it's real important that you run a strap in the back. The nice thing about a strap is you can ratchet it so you can bring it up or lower it down. It works extremely well for you guys.
And the last thing we want to do is compromise those brand new rubber mounts.
I know.
They can easily very well split in the middle.
You bet.
You know, Doug, having the nose off of this car made it really easy to get this big, heavy engine in place.
Oh, it did. This was fantastic the way it all worked out.
You know, the hardest part of this install really was the fact that we had to make sure not to scratch anything because this has been freshly painted, the chassis is painted, the firewall. There's only 1 inch air gap between the valve cover and the firewall itself. So the strap is working out perfect, everything is cool, it's bolted in, our lug nuts are holding it in place with a little bit of flash. Last thing I have to do is install my fan. And just like Doug said earlier, when you're doing something like this, there's going to be a lot of improvisation. I have 3 shims behind each one of these bolts holding the pulley in place because I had to align it, and the water pump, being a new water pump, just had a slightly different snout than the original one, and the original one was locked up.
Yeah, it's real important that you make sure the belt is always lined up. If it's slightly off, what'll happen is you're going to get a lot of wear on the belt, and the car is going to want to throw the belt. There's nothing worse than going down the road and all of a sudden losing your water pump because the belt's been thrown.
That's a good point too, because that's a V-belt, not very readily available in a lot of the stores, so you want to make sure that you do this properly so that you don't have a failure.
Absolutely.